Is everyone in already?
Yes, everyone is. Get started.
Okay, thank you. Well, a very good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to the press conference of 7 NGOs who have filed an originating summons today seeking the court's declarations on issues related to the Emergency Ordinance 2021. And we have proceeded to do so to protect the role of Parliament and judiciary in ensuring the necessary checks and balances are in place during this emergency. Welcome again to everyone. We would like to proceed with the press conference today with a round of introduction. I am Wachla Naidu, representing the Center for Independent Journalism, CIJ. CIJ is part of the team of litigants purely because of the impact the emergency has on our work. We are a freedom of expression civil society organization, which is non-profit in nature and focus on promoting fundamental freedoms such as right to speech, right to information. And in the context of freedom of expression, we promote and recognize the necessity for independence of media and free media spaces. In this regard, we have in the past initiated a number of legal reform initiatives, particularly around promoting and pushing on the advocacy for legislations around right to information. We were instrumental in pushing for the state level enactments on freedom of information in Penang and Selangor. We have also continued the engagement with different state agencies on promoting for a federal level legislation on right to information. We are also very actively engaged in promoting the establishment of Media Council. Now, these are all reform processes which have been stalled due to the suspension of Parliament and the state of emergency we are in. As a result, we feel that it's extremely important for CIJ and like-minded NGOs to proceed with this legal suit. Yeah, I would now like to call on the lead litigant, Bersih, and Thomas Fan will do the introduction.
Thank you, Wachala. Good afternoon. Thank you, members of the press and friends outside who are watching for joining us this afternoon. Bersih has been working on strengthening parliamentary democracy as well as electoral reform over the years. So we have, over the years, much engagement, especially in the last 2 years with Parliament, because what we want to see is a revitalized Parliament that is strong, that is able to act as a check and balance, effective check and balance to the executive. And we are also extremely interested in seeing our judiciary being an independent judiciary. So for this reason, we are extremely concerned with the action taken by the Prime Minister to, in one stroke, suspend Parliament and also the judiciary from even questioning the action. So we believe that there is enough legal ground, and therefore we are taking this legal action together with our fellow litigants to allow the court to interpret the law on behalf of not just us, but on behalf of the citizens of Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Now I'd like to call on Suaram.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Sivan. I'm from Suaram. Suaram working mainly on civil and political rights. We've been focusing more on detention without trial law. We've been campaigning against ISA and ISA is no more. Now we are focusing on other detention without trial laws like SOSMA, POCA, and POTA. We're also working on torture-related cases, police reform, as well as legal reform, especially against repressive laws. Lately, we've been engaging with parliamentary members of parliament and also parliamentary select committee, as well as attending ministerial meetings in terms of institutional reform and also legal reform. Now all this work is suspended because of this emergency. So we are part of this litigant team, and we hope we can bring this matter to the court. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sivan. Next, we'd like to call on Aliran.
Hello, everybody. I'm Anil Neto from Aliran. Aliran has been around since 1977, and we've been publishing a journal and then later a website on various issues. Especially one of the key issues has been the role of the independent institutions of government in a parliamentary democracy. And over the years, since 1977, we have highlighted how important it is to have this separation of powers as a form of checks and balances in the system, so that no institution will be able to resort to excesses. In this regard, we are really disappointed to see that Parliament has been suspended because we feel that that's the platform for our elected representatives to articulate the interests of the people and also to serve as a check and balance on the executive. So this is what we are. That's why we are here today.
Thank you very much, Anil. Next, we have the Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Chinese Assembly Hall.
Mr. Sir, Chunrong, 你在吗 ？Mr. Sir Chun Eng.
Yes, to unmute.
Unmute.
Yes. Sorry, I think he's talking. Mr. Sir, you need to unmute.
Yeah, Chunrong, 你要开声音。
But maybe the host unmute.
I've asked him to unmute, but I can't.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Can
Yes,
you hear
Mr.
me?
Sir, please proceed. Yes.
No, my name is Sir Chun Ing. I'm the acting president of this KL and Selangor Chinese Assembly Hall. All the while, we are very concerned about the human rights in the country, and then we are involved in the movement of the abolishment of the ISA. Now we are very concerned about this state of emergency proclaimed by the Yang di-Pertuan Agong. I think the reason for the proclamation of this state of emergency, I think, is very unjustified. Say is to fight the COVID-19, but I think we have sufficient measure. That is MCO to fight for the pandemic. So that's why we are very not agreeable to the proclamation of this state of emergency, and this is why we are here together with the Bersih and other NGO.
Thank you.
That's what. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, I would like to call on Pergerakan Tenaga Akademi Malaysia, Gerak.
Hi, my name is Suaram. I represent Gerak. Gerak, or Pergerakan Tenaga Akademi Malaysia, was established as an NGO in 1993. Its aim is to pursue academic freedom, particularly in Malaysian universities, and to lead the struggle for the welfare of academics and improvement of the quality of Malaysian tertiary education. In so doing, Gerak champions academic integrity and autonomy in a Malaysian education system that's increasingly being politicized and controlled. Academic freedom, we believe, is inevitably related to wider freedoms, including the freedom of expression and institutions, the freedom of institutions like Parliament. And for Parliament to be the main institution to promote and defend such freedoms. In this context and in this regard, then Gerak is very concerned about the suspension of Parliament and the inability of parliamentarians to discuss and debate issues. Hence, our reason for joining this, not only press conference, but this, what's the word for it? This action against, or action looking for some kind of solutions from the courts.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Next, we have Safe Rivers.
Hi, my name is Peter Kalang. I'm the chairman of Safe Rivers. Safe Rivers is based in Sarawak. Our focus is on human rights issues, especially the indigenous people, and also, of course, about the environment. Our main thrust of our work in Safe Rivers is in advocacy. So in advocacy, we do consultations with academics, with the private sectors, and the communities, and then, of course, with the politicians that include member of parliament and state assemblyman. So with this emergency rule, when the parliament cannot convene, and the same goes for the state assembly, we feel that this is a great impact on our work. It slows us down. So this is why we have joined this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've heard from the team of 7 litigants. I'm now like to just pass it on to Mr. Edmund Bond, who is acting on behalf of the litigants. Edmund, to introduce his legal team.
Thank you, Watsala. I'm Edmund Bond from Amir Bond, and team members here, Camelia, Beatrice, Sinu, Sue, and Yue are here. We filed the suit on behalf of the litigants today. Pass it over back to you, Watsala.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members of the media, you'll notice that we have shared the statements as well as a compilation of FAQs, both in English and in Bahasa. It is available in the chat box, and you can actually download it now. Moving on, we would like to invite Mr. Thomas Fan, representing Bersih as the lead litigant, to do a brief opening and to proceed with the reading of the statement in Bahasa Malaysia.
Thank you, Wachala. As earlier mentioned, we are extremely concerned as a civil society organization, along with a lot of Malaysians, by the recent declaration of emergency by the Prime Minister, for the reason that we believe that in a healthy democracy, there need to be a proper check and balance so that there can not be any abuse of executive power. So we have prepared a statement, which I will read to you now in Bahasa Malaysia, so that you have a clear picture of why we are taking this action. So I'll be sharing this screen right now. Okay. Kami, pertubuhan masyarakat sivil yang bertanda tangan di bawah, yang terlibat dalam pelbagai lapangan advokasi untuk mengukuhkan demokrasi berparlimen dan mempertahankan ruang sivil, telah mengemukakan saman sewakili kepentingan umum terhadap Perdana Menteri Muhyiddin Yassin dan Kerajaan Malaysia pada hari ini di Mahkamah Tinggi bagi mendapatkan deklarasi Mahkamah tentang isu-isu berkenaan Ordinan Darurat kuasa-kuasa perlu 2021. Kami bimbang peristiharan darurat dan Ordinan Darurat telah menyebabkan Dewan Rakyat dan Dewan Negara tidak dapat memenuhi kewajipan perlembagaan mereka sebagai tempat perbahasan dan pengundian bagi Ordinan Darurat. Kami juga khawatir kesan utama Ordinan Darurat adalah pergantungan Parlimen sedangkan kerajaan, badan kehakiman dan sektor swasta berjalan seperti biasa dengan terikat dengan peraturan PKP yang masih berkuasa. Kami ingin mahkamah mengisytiharkan sekiranya mereka mempunyai kuasa untuk menyemak sebarang percubaan untuk memindas peruntukan perlembagaan yang memerlukan semua undang-undang dibawa ke Parlimen terlebih dahulu. Secara khusus, kami ingin mendapatkan perisytiharan mahkamah sama ada Ordinan Darurat atau Seksyen 14 Ordinan tersebut yang telah menggantung Parlimen dan perkara 150 Clause 8 perlembagaan yang mengenepikan bidang kuasa mahkamah adalah tidak berperlembagaan. Itu soalan yang penting kita. Dalam permohonan kami kepada Mahkamah Tinggi Kuala Lumpur hari ini, kami mengajukan beberapa persoalan perundangan seperti berikut. Nombor 1, memandangkan kedua-dua Dewan Rakyat dan Dewan Negara tidak dibubarkan namun hanya ditangguhkan pada waktu tertentu, adakah proklamasi darurat yang dikeluarkan pada 11 Januari 2021 dan Ordinan Darurat yang diisytiharkan pada 14 Januari 2021 perlu dibentangkan di Parlimen sejajar dengan perkara 150 Klausa 3 Perlembagaan Persekutuan. Itu soalan yang pertama. Soalan yang kedua ialah adakah Seksyen 14 Ordinan Darurat berkaitan pergantungan Parlimen adalah sah memandangkan ianya mencegah atau menghalang pengoperasian perkara 150 Klausa 3 Perlembagaan Persekutuan. Okey. Soalan yang ketiga ialah adakah pindaan perlembagaan 1981 yang memasukkan perkara 150 Klausa 8 Perlembagaan Persekutuan yang seakan-akan mengenepikan bidang kuasa mahkamah adalah tidak berperlembagaan kerana mengingkari perkara 4 dan perkara 121 Perlembagaan Persekutuan dan atau atas struktur asas perlembagaan persekutuan. Nombor 4 yang terakhir, adakah perkara 150 Klausa 8 Perlembagaan Persekutuan jikalaupun ianya sah menghalang mahkamah untuk menyemak ke perlembagaan sesuatu ordinan yang dibuat di bawah perkara 150 Klausa 2B yang tidak mematuhi, mencegah atau menghalang keperluan perkara 150 Klausa 3 Perlembagaan Persekutuan yang memperuntukkan keperluan proklamasi atau ordinan dibentangkan di Parlimen. Itu soalan yang kita akan tuju kepada Mahkamah Tinggi. Dan saya jemput rakan saya Zarum untuk terus membacakan kenyataan ini.
Penggantungan Parlimen adalah satu langkah drastik. Proklamasi darurat kami percaya melampaui perlembagaan dan tidak sejajar dengan keadaan semasa. Sebagai warga yang bekerja demi rakyat serta memperjuangkan reformasi, pergantungan Parlimen mengganggu kerja kami disebabkan kami tidak dapat memperoleh dan mencari penyelesaian semasa sidang Parlimen mengenai isu-isu yang berkaitan. Kami percaya bahawa kedaulatan undang-undang perlu dipertahankan dan semangat perlembagaan persekutuan perlu dipatuhi, di mana terdapat pengasingan kuasa yang jelas di antara cabang kuasa eksekutif, legislatif dan kehakiman. Dan tidak ada satu cabang yang boleh mengatasi cabang kuasa yang lainnya. Kehilangan semak dan imbang dalam demokrasi berparlimen akan mengakibatkan kesan jangka panjang yang tidak terpulihkan yang tak terpulihkan yang akan memusnahkan negara kita, kerana kerajaan yang tidak bersemak mudah menjadi kerajaan yang draconian dan kleptokratik. Kami yakin bahawa kerajaan sudah mempunyai kuasa yang mencukupi untuk menangani krisis COVID-19 dan mereka tidak perlu menggantung parlimen melalui Ordinan Darurat. Sebagaimana rakyat Malaysia yang lain, kami amat khawatir dengan kesan buruk pandemik ini, kehilangan nyawa, kerja dan hakisan ekonomi yang sangat teruk. Kestabilan politik adalah diperlukan untuk kerajaan membawa kita keluar dari krisis yang tidak terjangka ini. Namun kestabilan tidak boleh dicapai dengan mengorbankan institusi semak dan imbang oleh parlimen dan badan kehakiman. Kami melakukan litigasi ini demi kepentingan umum untuk mempertahankan kedaulatan undang-undang dan sistem semak imbang serta untuk mendapatkan keputusan badan kehakiman berkenaan isu-isu terkait dengan Ordinan Darurat. Oleh yang demikian, di atas kepentingan awam, kami melakukan cabaran kehakiman supaya mahkamah dapat menentukan kuasa keperlembagaan parlimen dan badan kehakiman dalam mempertahankan sistem semak dan imbang negara kita. Dan kenyataan ini ditandatangani oleh kami, iaitu Gabungan Pilihan Raya Bersih dan Adil, Bersih 2.0, Suara Rakyat Malaysia, Suaram, Center for Independent Journalism, CIJ, Aliran, Dewan Perhimpunan Cina Kuala Lumpur dan Selangor, KLSCAH, Pergerakan Tenaga Akademik Malaysia, Gerak dan Save Rivers.
Terima kasih kepada rakan-rakan perjuangan kita. Seterusnya, kita akan beralih kepada statement dalam bahasa Inggeris. Next, we'll move on to the statement to be read out in English. Calling on colleagues from Suaram, Sivan, followed by Peter from Safe Rivers.
Thank you, Watsala. The press statement in English, 2nd February 2021. NGOs ask courts to consider role of judiciary and parliament in ensuring checks and balances during emergency. We, the undersigned civil society organizations involved in various areas of advocacy to strengthen parliamentary democracy and the safeguarding of the civic space, filed a public interest suit today at the High Court against Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin and the Government of Malaysia to seek court declaration on issues related to the Emergency Essential Power Ordinance 2021. We are concerned that the proclamation of emergency and the emergency ordinance have resulted in both houses of parliament being unable to fulfill their constitutional role of debating and voting on the emergency ordinance. We are also concerned that the main effect of the emergency ordinance is the suspension of the parliament, while it is business as usual for both government, judiciary, and also private sector, subject to the restriction imposed under the ongoing movement control order. We would like the court to declare if they have the power to review any attempt that circumvent constitutional provision which require this instrument to be brought before parliament first. In particular, we are seeking declaration on whether the Emergency Essential Power Ordinance or Section 14 of the Ordinance which suspend Parliament and Article 158 of the Constitution, 158 of the Constitution which oust the jurisdiction of the court are unconstitutional. In our submission at the Kuala Lumpur High Court today, we posed 4 main questions. Number 1, given the both House of Parliament and had not been dissolved, but only stood.
Sorry? Can we hear Sivan?
No.
Yeah, Sivan? Sivan, I think there's a break.
He got cut off.
Yeah.
So we
He's
can
back.
continue.
Yeah.
So
Sivan, you got cut off. Do you mind starting maybe from the beginning of the sentence? Can you hear us, Sivan?
no, I think it's out
Maybe,
of the room.
Yeah.
Wachala,
Maybe
you
we
continue.
could, yeah. Okay, I'm just going to start from where he has stopped. And I'm going to start from the beginning, given that the both houses of parliament had not been dissolved, but only stood adjourned at the relevant times, whether the proclamation of emergency issued on 11 January 2021 and the emergency essential powers ordinance 2021 promulgated on 14 January 2021 had to be laid before both houses of parliament pursuant to Article 115 Clause 3 of the Federal Constitution. The second question, whether Section 14 of the Emergency Essential Powers Ordinance 2021 relating to the suspension of Parliament is valid insofar as it prevents or frustrates the operation of Article 150 Clause 3 of the Federal Constitution. Section 14 purports to, inter alia, disable the operation of the provisions of the Federal Constitution relating to the summoning, propagation, and dissolution of Parliament, and to cancel any meeting of Parliament that had been summoned but not yet held. And question 3, whether the 1981 constitutional amendment that added Article 150, Clause 8 of the Federal Constitution that purportedly outs the jurisdiction of the court is unconstitutional for violating Article 4 and 121 of the Federal Constitution and or the basic structure of the Federal Constitution. Sivan, would you like to continue? I see that you're back. Or we have one more point here. Yeah, point 4.
Got disconnected. You're stopped at which number, Vasala?
I've just finished 3. You can continue with the 4th one.
Thank you. Yeah, number 4, whether Article 158 of the Federal Constitution, even if valid, prevents the court from reviving the constitutionality of an ordinance made under Article 150(2)(b) that does not comply with, prevents, or frustrate the requirements of Article 153 of the Federal Constitution, which require the proclamation ordinance to be laid before Parliament. The suspension of the Parliament is an extremely drastic measure. This emergency overarches the questions, the Constitution and disproportionate. As citizen and public-spirited interest groups fighting for reform, the suspension of Parliament attacks our work greatly as we are unable to access to seek recourse during parliamentary sitting on matters of concern. Then I pass on to Peter. Sorry for the glitches. Thank you.
We believe the rule of law. We believe the rule of law should be preserved and the spirit of the Federal Constitution is adhered to, where there is a clear separation of power between the executive, legislative, and judiciary, and that no one branch of the government should be subjected to the other. The loss of such checks and balance in our parliamentary democracy would have a long-term, irrevocable impact that could ruin our country, as an unchecked government could turn draconian and kleptocratic. We believe that the government already has enough power to handle the COVID-19 crisis, and they do not need to resort to suspending Parliament through the emergency ordinance. Like all Malaysians, we are extremely concerned with the devastating impact of the pandemic, the loss of life, livelihood, and rapid erosions of the economy. Political stability is necessary for the government to steer us out of the unprecedented crisis. But stability must not be achieved at the expense of institutional check and balance provided by the Parliament and the judiciary. For these reasons, it is in the public interest that we undertook this legal challenge to allow the court to determine the constitutional power of Parliament and the judiciary in upholding our system of check and balance. We undertook this litigation in the public interest to defend the rule of law and the system of check and balance, and to check the judiciary's determination to issue related to the emergency ordinance, signed by the Coalition for Clean and Fair Election, Bersih 2.0, Suara Rakyat Malaysia, Suaram, Center for Independent Journalism, CIJ, Aliran, the Kuala Lumpur and Selangor Chinese Assembly Hall, KLSCAH, Perikatan Tenaga Akademik Malaysia, Gerak, Safe Rivers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I call on my colleague, Sir, from KLSCAH, I'd just like to remind members of the media who following the press conference via Facebook Live that the statement has been uploaded on Bersih's website as well as Bersih's Facebook page. So it could be downloaded from the website. Thank you. Yes, please proceed. Mr. Sir would summarize the statement in Mandarin.
Okay. I will say a few words in Mandarin for this dedication. 各位记者先生，各位朋友，我仅代表这7个团体，这7个提出诉讼的团体，讲几句话。首先，我要讲解一下为什么我们要提出这个诉讼。主要的原因是因为紧急状态的颁布，赋予行政权任意和不受约束的权利，并限制了联邦宪法赋予人民的基本权利和自由。政府可以在施行紧急状态之下，任意制定任何紧急状态的条例来治理国家。各位，这也是我们建国以来首次发生因为实施紧急状态而导致国州议会的决策失效、泄露被迫停摆的情况。会议被冻结，意味着我们的民选代表无法充分发表有效的制衡和监督政府的决策。在我国联邦宪法下，国州议会必须充当人民的传声筒，反映人民的心声。为显然，2021年紧急条例下实施的紧急状态将瘫痪我国现有的民主体制，并让人民保持闲闷，限制人民发声的权利。在促进民众参与法治和善治方面，我们作为公民有权利，亦必须时刻监督和问责政府所执行的政策，以恢复我们对参与民主的信心。即使拥有不同的立场和利益，公民组织也有权利表达自己的主张和意见，并且最后不会遭到对付和报复。作为马来西亚公民，联邦宪法赋予我们的基本人权是毋庸置疑的。因此，本次提出的诉讼旨在维护公共利益框架下的法治精神。我们寻求司法的意见，以挑战政府实施紧急状态的合法性。我们相信本次诉讼将使所有马来西亚人以一种或另一种方式知道最终结果和答案。我们期待这次的诉讼，我们深信法庭有权针对人民入禀法庭挑战政府实施紧急状态的决定进行这个司法的审理，以恢复国会的运作，让人民代议士能够针对政府颁布紧急状态的决定进行辩论和投票表决。我们亦希望司法能够宣判政府通过2021年紧急条例下在全国实施的紧急状态无效。另一方面，我们也要澄清， 我们希望这一次的诉讼，司法单位能够协助阐释和解读联邦宪法第150条文，并给予我们建设性的意见。我们并没有质疑亦无意挑战最高元首在首相劝告下颁布紧急状态的权利。我们坚信在联邦宪法架构下，国家的各个单位和部门享有平等的权利，这就是我们相信的这个separation of power， 就是这个三权分立。因此，这意味着立法机关和司法机关能够针对政府的施政同样对等的制衡与监督角色。联邦宪法第121条文赋予司法机关固有的权利和权限以审理所有的案件，这是联邦宪法的基本特征。我们正在寻求的是希望通过司法挑战紧急状态的合法性。假如我们最终挑战成功，意味着政府必须遵守司法的判决，即当前实施的紧急状态可视为无效，为还是的市政府针对司法的裁定有进一步的行动。I think I say I was.
Yes.
This is what
Thank you very much.
want to say.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Sir. Terima kasih, Mr. Sir. Now we'll open the floor for questions from the media. Feel free to just indicate. Perhaps you can use the buttons there to indicate if you have any questions, or you can also post the questions in the chat box. Thomas and the Bersih team, I'm not sure how we can take questions from the Facebook Live.
We can.
Yeah. Okay.
If there are questions, we will post it into the chat box here.
Okay, that's great. Okay. Yeah. So we can see how many questions are pending. We could take it in a round of 3, or we can see how we can respond one after the other. Anyone with questions? I don't see any indications. Okay, so there's one question. How long will it take for a response to the legal suit? Edmund and your team, would you like to take that first?
Thanks, Watsala. The suit was filed today, so we hope to be able to extract the sealed copy probably by the end of the week and then serve it on the government and the court, I think, acts quite quickly on these type of matters. So we would be probably looking at 1-2 weeks for case management, and then thereafter directions from the court to file a reply, if any.
Okay, so there's another question from Facebook as well. Fundamentally, the lawsuit is asking the court to answer the question: is the suspension of Parliament in the emergency ordinance legal? In the emergency ordinance legal, our constitution requires the emergency proclamation and ordinance to be placed before Parliament. Parliament, in turn, has the power to annul the proclamation and the ordinance. But the ordinance has purported to suspend Parliament indefinitely. Is that legal? And again,
you want me to? Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes. I think the question encapsulates the controversy very well. And the suits that were filed previously by Encik Khairuddin and Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim may not have touched on this procedural point. which we say is a constitutional safeguard under Article 150. Basically, that any proclamation of emergency, any emergency ordinance that is promulgated under 150 should as soon as possible be tabled before Parliament for debate. And if there is a debate, there should be a vote. If it is annulled, then the proclamation and ordinance gets shot down. So the question is the question for the court, whether this constitutional safeguard that on the one hand is given in Article 150, but then on the other hand is taken away by the same ordinance that was created by 150, whether that is constitutional, whether that is legal, and whether that conflicts with the Constitution. So if the answer to that question, as read out just now, the answer to that question 1, question 2, and question 4 in essence deals with that controversy. So we are saying that you need to table it before Parliament, and we are looking at that argument as the main argument. In fact, it's a substantial argument that is the main argument that should be interpreted by the court. That is the essence of the public interest litigation suit. The second question regards, and this is something which the public have asked, the second question regards Article 1508. 1508 was inserted in 1981 to oust the jurisdiction of the court from hearing any challenge against the emergency proclamation or against the emergency ordinance. So the second part of the suit is to strike down that 1981 amendment that removes the court's powers, because we are saying that you cannot remove the court's powers from hearing matters of such grave importance, especially when there is an allegation of constitutional breach. So we cannot answer the question now, but you have encapsulated a controversy, and I think I've explained what the position of the litigants are on that controversy.
Thank you, Edmund. There's again another question from Facebook. I'm just wondering if there's any questions here from the members of media who's present. I don't see any raised hands, so we will just proceed with the question from Facebook. Yeah, can you please highlight under what you guys are challenging this in terms of course of actions? A question from Sidika Singh. Again, anyone from the litigants? If not, I'll pass it on to Edmund again.
The answer is that it's a constitutional breach of Article 150. And secondly, that the ouster clause of the court's jurisdiction goes against the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution, which has been recently debated in the federal court in Maria Chin's case. And the federal court judges seem to be, there seem to be split on the question of whether ouster clauses are unconstitutional. Although I must say that in Maria Chin's case, the majority decided that ouster clauses are constitutional. But because the federal court is split, I think it is a right time to look at the issue again, especially when it pertains to an emergency.
Okay. Thank you, Edmund. There's a question from Jerry. Would you like to unmute yourself? Jerry, I think you'll have to unmute yourself. I see a hand raised. Sorry, have we lost? Jerry Chong had his hands up. Oh, okay, no mic. Do you want to maybe type in your question in the chat box, Jerry? And we can, yeah, we'll take the question from the chat box. Oh, it's above. Okay, so There are a few questions, again from Facebook as well. What happens if court finds that it was illegal now that Parliament's dissolved? What will be the legal remedy? And I don't know if Edmund, you'd like to take this, and perhaps also the subsequent questions, because there is another one which is related to the fact that people are saying that the PN government itself is unconstitutional, so the proclamation of an emergency is moot anyway. Will this route of argument be valid as well? And I guess another one from Sitika saying, did you all file for certificate of urgency too?
The first question, what happens if the court finds that it's illegal now that Parliament is dissolved, is actually a factually wrong question, because Parliament has not been dissolved. The Dewan Rakyat and the Dewan Negara were adjourned sine die in December 2020 to a date that was to be fixed. On the calendar on the website of Parliament, it seemed that the dates that were fixed were for March. Under the Constitution, Parliament must be called within 6 months from the last time it sits. So Parliament has not been dissolved, it's just been adjourned. When Parliament is dissolved, the government or the Election Commission has to conduct general elections to fill the seats. But if you ask whether the question is due to the suspension of Parliament by the emergency ordinance, if it is illegal, then what happens is that the Prime Minister and the government will be obliged to follow the court's decision that advice to the Yang di-Pertuan Agong to call an emergency was wrong. And they cannot do it on the same basis. What other consequential remedies that can be taken depends on what actions were taken by the government in pursuit of the emergency ordinance provisions that were given. So the legal remedies may lie in a separate suit, but we first have to get over the issue of how the courts interpret Article 150. This is the first time, I think, and from our research, that such a challenge has been made. This is also the first time that so many NGOs have come together to file a public interest litigation suit to vindicate the rule of law. And I think it is because the emergency that has been called is so drastic that everyone in the spirit of constitutionalism are concerned about the impact on the people and their work. I will not go into the other question about whether the PN government is unconstitutional. That is not an issue which the legal suit covers. So then it may be better that it's answered by someone else or by the politicians.
Yeah. One more question, Edmund. Did you all file for certificate of urgency too?
We haven't filed a certificate of urgency because we feel that the courts these days have been acting very quickly. And as I said, we hope to be able to extract the seal order as soon as possible. We must say that the courts have been very responsive, have been very fast. And I'm sure with this type of suit, they will act with the same prompt speed that we expect the courts to act in this day and age.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Jerry, perhaps I'll post this to my fellow litigants. There is a perception that the EO was called primarily to diffuse calls for snap elections. Now, given the current state of COVID-19 in Malaysia, in which elections will likely be unwise, is there any way to postpone elections without having to impose an emergency order? May I call on any of our litigants? Perhaps someone we have not heard yet, heard from. Anil, would you like to take this question? Anil, you have to unmute.
We are now in January, and the next general election is only due in another 3 years or so. So I think there's plenty of time for the general election, especially. And for the snap elections, we don't know whether it's going to be a snap election, but I think the first thing that we need to do is for the MPs to come to Parliament and sit down and talk about what's the next step going to be, and yeah, so without actually having Parliament, we won't be able to get to that stage. So I think it's very important that Parliament sits to discuss what's going on in the country and how it can pursue its role in acting as a check and balance on the executive at the moment. And there's a lot to discuss because of the COVID crisis at the moment.
Okay, yes. Anyone else would like to add to that, or we'll move on to the next question? Yeah.
Maybe I can add.
Yes, Thomas.
Yeah. I think this question, we will answer briefly because it's not the main scope of it. We're not here to speculate whether there's a snap election or not. But I think for Bersih, we have always said that first of all, I think the Yang di-Pertuan Agong has the prerogative to whether to dissolve the Parliament midterm. So a year ago during the Sheraton move, we saw the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, His Majesty, exercise that prerogative, and there was no dissolution of Parliament. But we also say that if an election is due because of its full term, and as Anil said just now, GE15 is not due for another 2.5 years. The next one will be Sarawak state election due in June this year. Can this election be postponed without an emergency? I would say no, according to the law, but I think elections can be held safely, has been proven throughout the world in this last 1 year. There have been many major elections that has been held without seeing a surge in COVID cases. And I think this is the challenge to the Election Commission, our Election Commission, to up their game, to improve their processes, offer postal voting, remote voting, and maybe even expand polling day from 1 day to 7 days, just to spread out, to keep people safe, and using technology as well. But that's another question. So I would say that there is no justification to suspend Parliament just to delay elections.
Yep. Thank you. There's another question again in the chat box. It's in relation to the federal court's reason upholding of the constitutionality of the ouster clause. Edmund?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mentioned just now that in Maria Chin's case, the court decided 4-3 that ouster clauses are constitutional, but we feel that there are different nuances to the majority judgment. There are also nuances to the minority judgment. 4-3 is a very narrow decision of the highest court. And there was a warning, if I recall, by the Honorable CJ in her judgment in Maria Chin, that the federal court should not really so quickly change their decisions. Because if you recall, pre-Maria Chin, Semenye Jaya, I think Indira Gandhi, Aldo Nuro, there were a few cases where the ouster clause were declared to be unconstitutional. This, however, 1508 has not been challenged as unconstitutional previously, and therefore the issue arises again, and it can be litigated again, given that the federal court, this matter is a matter of importance, and that the federal court has seen itself fit to make various decisions that may or may not instill public confidence, because it used to be the case that when there is a court decision, that court decision stands for some time. But recently we have seen very interesting developments in the federal court where decisions are changed within a short space of time.
Yes. Thank you, Edmund. Very interesting question. Again from Facebook, how would you rate your chances of achieving your objectives? Again, back to my fellow litigants. Anybody would like to take this? Anyone would like to? Yes, Thomas. Yeah.
Yeah, I think based on Edmund's earlier explanation of the cases, not just the most recent Maria Chin's case, but Semenyi Jaya and Indira Gandhi's case and other cases. On the question of the ouster clause itself, I think we feel that there is a fair chance, at least a 50-50 chance. I don't know whether Edmund would agree with us, with my assessment, because, and I think also based on our discussion, the litigants and with our lawyers, Edmund, we wouldn't take up this case if we don't think that we have a fair chance that the court will adjudicate according to the Constitution.
Thank you, Thomas. I think it's also very important to stress the fact that as litigants, most of us are here not just completely or purely for the sake of winning, but it's also a matter of principle that we are placing an objection and we are challenging these provisions, and this is very much in the public's interest. So it has to go hand in hand. And it's very important for all of us to use the space and voice our positions and opinions, even if it's a dissenting opinion. Do we have any more questions? Yep. If there are no more questions from our friends from media here and Facebook, I'd just like to give opportunity either to say a few words, or I'll pass it back on to Thomas, and if you have any closing remarks. Yeah. Yes, Thomas.
So thank you. I just want to reiterate what was shared by Wachala just now, that we take up this litigation really on behalf of every rakyat of Malaysia, because it should concern all of us that the executive, the prime minister, any prime minister, not just this one, would be able to use this instrument of an emergency without just cause to suspend in one stroke, I say, the parliament and the judiciary. I think this should concern all of us, that minister should bypass the constitutional process that's already in our constitution. So it is our hope that the courts, the judiciary, will look at that part of the constitution and that part of the law and give a judgment that basically reinstate parliamentary democracy, whereby the executive don't act alone, but acts together with the legislative and the judiciary as basically the defender to defend and interpret any potential gross abuse. So this action, is not taken on behalf of any one group, any one section of Malaysia, or any NGO, but really for all of us Malaysian. This is a very important question and an important day for us.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Yeah.
Yes, go on. Proceed. Sorry. Yeah.
We just also want to thank the firm of Edmund Bond, for offering their service to us in this matter pro bono. And really, this is a public interest litigation, and we are really appreciative of the services of Bond.
Thank you very much, Thomas. On this note, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us at the press conference today. As already shared earlier, these statements, both in the different languages as well as I think eventually an FAQ, will be available on Bersih's website as well as social media platform. It will also be made available, and I think in the various websites and social media platforms of the other litigants as well. Please do get in touch with us if you have further queries, if you need any clarification. You have all our names and organizational information. Thank you very much again for coming. We look forward to updating all of you with the subsequent proceedings and hopefully with a decision coming soon. Thank you very much and have a good day. And thank you very much.